Welcome to How to Not Be a Screw Up, a blunt and honest discussion about how to change your life for the better. My name is Stephen Burns.
And I'm Brian Costello, and Steve and I have been working as coaches and therapists and trainers in the world of mental health for over 20 years.
So if you felt like your life is out of control and you don't know why you're doing the things that you do, then this is the podcast for you. So welcome to How to Not Be a Screw Up, a blunt and honest discussion about how to change your life for the better. My name is Stephen Burns and I'm here with my buddy Brian Costello. How the heck are you, Brian?
I'm very well, sir. Very well. I've been to the gym already.
I was going to say you're looking positively ripped. You're filling up the camera quite beautifully there.
This is an extra small t-shirt. By the way, it's not an extra small t-shirt for anybody watching. I promise it's not. I'm not that vain. Anyway.
I'm very impressed. You know, someone who goes to the gym at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, that shows amazing discipline, I've got to be honest.
Yeah, maybe we should do a podcast on that.
I think so. Yeah, sounds
absolutely.
Good. So what are we going to talk about today? So we're going to talk about the all-important subject of forgiveness. I think you need a whiskey for this one. I mean, I don't drink whiskey, but I think I'll start drinking whiskey. This could get real.
I think this could get real. I love this topic. This is one of my favourite things. When we were talking about it before and you went, what about forgiveness? I'm like, oh yes, this is just such a big thing. I think we could return to this topic a few times.
It is a cracker.
To be honest.
So do you have any sort of initial thoughts on forgiveness, Brian? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I have to be careful not to peak too early here because we've got a half-hour podcast to fill. I think that my overall thoughts on forgiveness as a whole is that it's such a fundamentally freeing thing. I think in terms of our lives, so many of us walk about and we hold grudges about lots of things that have happened in our pasts. We hold grudges to the bullies who bullied us in school, to ex-partners who broke our hearts, to sometimes our parents, our families, school teachers, ex-bosses, all these people. And I think that for many, many people out there, what's happening is that they build up this they become normalised to the amount of resentment they carry about, where they're not actually just forgiving people. And we'll cover this later, but I'm going to drop this in just now. I think there's also a fundamental error or a thing that people think about. Falsehood, that's a good word. This is us like doing our big syllables again. A falsehood about forgiveness, which is it's about letting people away with stuff, and it's about saying, okay, I don't care that you did that to me, it doesn't matter, when, as we'll talk about later, I don't believe that's what it's about at all. What about yourself?
I totally agree. I think it's important to figure out what forgiveness actually is, because at the end of the day, it is a kind of abstract label, isn't it? And you can ask like a dozen different people what forgiveness is, and they'll most likely give you a dozen different answers. I remember on that subject, just that you mentioned there, you triggered something in me. So my favourite subject to talk about influencers on TikTok, because I am on TikTok now, and it's a crazy, mad, Wild West type place. And so I was watching this female influencer, and she was talking about forgiveness. That was her big thing. And one of the points she made was that there's some people who you shouldn't forgive, that people have done such unspeakable acts that they don't deserve forgiveness. And I get where she's coming from, right? But I think she's totally missed the point, because she's working from the premise that forgiveness is an external thing. It's something that you do to someone else, you know. When that's not true. You know, forgiveness is an internal thing. It's something that you do for you. You don't have to like confront the person in the street or phone them up and say, I forgive you, or something like that. You don't have to at all. You know, it's about doing it for yourself. So for me, I think forgiveness is very much about making that intentional decision to let go of all of that hurt, anger, resentments, all of that stuff you've been building up over the years. But ultimately, it's something that you do for you.
That is just such a perfect summary. I think that's it. When I speak to my clients about it, I've got this wee spiel that I go through where I say to them, pretty much just paraphrasing what you just said, this is not about them, it's about you. And it's about you saying enough. I think that what happens, and this is obviously, there's a variety of ways to look at this, but especially when something has been done to you personally, not something, you know, could we get into that thing of, I suppose if you held a lot of resentment to somebody who was like, I don't know, like Hitler or something like that, should you forgive somebody who has hurt so many people and caused so much damage and still, whatever it is now, we're racing up in 100 years, since that, and that we still hold on to it. That's a bit of a different discussion. I think when it happens to you personally, there's people give us their emotion. That's the way I always look at it. Is that so? I was bullied in school, so I now look at it. I couldn't look at this way for years, by the way. So for anybody watching this isn't something that I came out at the end of. I left school at the end of 5th year. I didn't come out at the end of 5th year and go, "Oh my goodness, now I am enlightened. I am going to forgive everybody because I now understand this." This is something that I had to work at and probably be at the right stage of my life for. But what I now recognise is that it was their insecurity, but what they did was they gave it to me. Mm-hmm. And for many people watching this or listening to this, I think what they'll find is that when they look back through their lives, you were given someone else's shame, you were given someone else's insecurity, someone else's fear, someone else's anger, and it's been passed to you. And just, again, paraphrasing what you just said, for me, forgiveness is the act of giving that back. And as you said, you don't have to see them, you don't have to talk to them to do that. It's an internal choice to go, I don't want this anymore. This isn't mine. So I'm going to give you that back, and I'm going to live the rest of my life without it. Doesn't mean forgetting it either. I think you would agree with that. It's not about forgetting what happened. It's not trying to pretend that it didn't happen. It's just letting go of all that hurt and all that shame or whatever else it is that's connected to it.
I love the idea of giving the person all the hurt and anger back.
Yeah.
The vindictive part of me kind of likes that for some reason. I don't know why, but maybe that's not the best from a perspective of forgiveness. But no, I do like it. I think that's a cool idea. I think as well, it's about appreciating that the past is the past.
Yep.
It's like all we have left now is our perception of the past. So if you're replaying something that happened to you 5, 10, 15 years ago, or even, a few weeks or a few months ago, then you are the one that's replaying that inside your perception. You're the one that's holding on to it. To share a story, so for me, you know bits of this story, you maybe don't know all of the detail.
Oh, here we go.
Here we go, exactly, yes, some extra detail. So when I was in my 20s to early 30s, so I was in a long-term relationship, and I lived with someone for 2.5 years, I think. We were pretty much heading towards the whole kind of marriage with kids and stuff. Clearly a lucky escape for me. And the relationship ended. So it wasn't a particularly fulfilling relationship, but I just kind of hung about for an extra 5 or 6 years to see if it changed. And of course it didn't. And it ended really, really badly, as many relationships do. And what happened was, without going too much into the nitty gritty of the details, I might break down and need some therapy in this room here. No, honestly, I don't. And but basically, she decided it would be a good idea to basically empty the entire savings account. So we're talking roughly around about £10,000, and put all of the accounts in the overdraft. So you're talking in the region of around about 15k in total.
Wowzers.
So at the time as well, I'd also signed, because we lived together, I'd signed a contract to buy her out of the house, which was, of course, fair enough. But I was trying to be the nice guy, and I paid her a little bit extra because she didn't really have a job at the time. And I didn't realise that she was going to basically, rob the entire savings accounts and all of those things as well. But then right after I signed that contract and this whole thing kicked off, it was also the same time as the financial crisis. So my house price basically plummeted by about 30 or 40%. So it just put me in this really difficult position financially. I went from being reasonably affluent to pretty much being like significantly in debt in the space of a couple of months. It was quite an amazing turnaround. So for a while, I held tons of resentment, tons of anger. And there was an additional thing where I didn't trust people as well, in relationships in particular.
Absolutely. That's how it works.
Because of what happened. And I'm not saying I was completely blameless, by the way. It always takes two to tango. But I really held on to that hurt for a while. And then one day I just realised that the past, it was over. It was gone. And there was no point in holding on to that experience and reliving it inside my mind and holding on to all of that resentment and all of that hurt. I didn't give it back to her. Maybe that would have been quite a good thing to do. Although I bumped into her fairly recently, but that would have been a good opportunity.
Maybe
to
you
say,
don't have to actually
exactly,
give it back. You don't have to hand it back. It's just not in here.
By the way, I have some hurts of the last few years. But yeah, no, it was a real moment of clarity where I realised that I could hold on to this for another, several months or several years, or I could just move on. I could just let go of it and just put the past in the past. And for me, it was very freeing. It just felt so much lighter because of that. But ultimately, I think it was the realisation that it was over. It was done. So what's the point in holding on to
I think that's the key though, isn't it? What's the point in holding on to it? Like, for anybody listening to this or watching this, I guarantee there's going to be loads of people listening or watching this that have a very similar story to what you've just talked about. And it might be something slightly different. It might be somebody else that they hold resentment to, But as you said there, what's the point in holding on to it? I don't know what... It must be some sort of... There's quite a lot of design flaws, I think, in our emotional makeup, in terms of how our brain's been created. But that, for me, is really one of them, because it's something that so many people do. It's like, this isn't an isolated thing. As again, if you're listening to us speak just now, this isn't something that's just you. You could, you're hearing Steve talk about it. I'm already talking about the fact that when I was bullied in school, I have various things like that as well. Where luckily I've never had a bank account cleared out right enough at the end of a relationship.
It's great fun.
I can imagine.
Life changing.
Yeah, well, that's it. It probably is. But it's what's our brain trying to achieve? I think that quite often, when I'm sitting in front of a client or something like that, I'm like, what's our brain actually trying to achieve by holding on to it? And I think that in some level, we must think that, by letting it go, we've let them win, or by letting them go, that we're leaving ourselves unprotected. It's like, but that could happen again. I'm going to never let anybody treat me like that again, or I need them to know how much I hate them. But anytime I ever think about this, I always think about The Life of Brian, which, if you've never watched it, by the way, set yourself some homework and just go and watch it. I think it's a work of genius. But there's a bit near the start, and apologies to any Monty Python absolute geeks, because I might get the name of the particular squad wrong. But actually, it's near the end of the movie, as... something's happening. I don't want to put any spoilers in, but a group of people run up and say that they're the Judean People's Front Crack Suicide Squad. And they stand there and they all, I think they take out knives, and then they all stab themselves, and then they all fall to the ground, and one of them goes, "That showed them." And then they all die, and nobody gave a crap, and nobody looked. And I always think that's a little bit like holding on to all that resentment. It's like, it's actually not really, nobody else is bothering. That person that you were in the relationship with, I expect at some point has moved on and started to live their lives. I would absolutely guarantee that the people who bullied me in school probably don't give me a second thought anymore. Yet for years, I carried them about inside my head, and the thought that, well, that shows them, when actually it doesn't at all.
It's a lot of work as well, isn't it? I mean,
absolutely. A lot of mental time, emotional time goes into it.
It is funny because, I read fairly recently that if you look at how animals deal with bad experiences in the wild and how they deal with things like trauma, is what they do is they actually go off to a secluded position and they just shake it off physically. So you actually see them physically shaking, and that's it. They just go about their business after that, which sounds amazing. But as human beings, we have this incredible ability to hold on to that for years and potentially even decades. And I think you touched on something really important. I think for me, one of the reasons why we often hold on to that hurt, that resentment and struggle to forgive, is because we've got objections to forgiving, that we feel that it's attempting, that it's serving something for us, that's actually doing something positive. You mentioned protection there, and I think, the vast majority of the time, I think that's it. I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there. It's a protection thing, because you were hurt back then, so you want to make sure that you're not going to be hurt again. So you hold on to that as a reminder that you've got to make sure that you're going to be okay, that you're not going to repeat the same mistakes. So So I think the first step in forgiveness is to remove those blocks, remove those objections, or at the very least, almost like kind of reframe them inside our minds, look at them in a slightly different way. One of the things I like to call that is giving the green light to forgive.
Yep.
You know, it's like once you've kind of given yourself that green light, then it's okay. You can kind of let go. You can actually move on. So a question I always like to ask is, what objections do I have to letting this go? Or what is there to learn here that would allow me to move forward? Or there was another one that came in mind, but suddenly disappeared.
I'll come back to it.
It will come back. Well, no, I got it. Yeah. How can you forgive in a way that still keeps you protected? And I think it's a good question because it opens up that space for you to be able to forgive, but also honour those objections, honour those blocks that are preventing you from forgiving in the first place.
That's important though, isn't it? I think it's all very easy for us to sit here and if you hadn't said that, to give this impression that, you know, that the blocks are in some way wrong. But actually, as you said, they're there to keep you safe. So it is important to, I love that way you said that, you know, to honour them, to go, right, okay, I accept that you're there because at that time I didn't have a coping strategy to be able to know how to deal with whatever was going on, or maybe I was taken by surprise, like in your example where something happened that was like a sudden trauma where you're kind of like, you know, I can have no retribution. I can't speak to the person again, or I choose not to speak to that person again. I think it's important to look at those objections and go, right, okay, it's okay to have had them. But as you say, give the green light to forgiveness, to just go that night. This is now a choice. I have to make the choice now to move on. If you're enjoying this pod and you want more, then Steve and I have produced a special video series just for you. 6 lessons that you can sign up for right now for totally free.
So if you want to check that out, the link should pop up on the video just now. If you're listening on audio though, we'll include that link in the show notes if you want to check it out. Yeah. So do you have any, I guess, that leads us on to possible techniques. I guess we've talked here about the first step to forgiving, where you honour those objections, you take a look at them. So what do you think? Do you have any advice on techniques or processes that people can go through to help them really let go?
Absolutely. I think there's some, we both know that there are some quite deep therapeutic techniques that if you find a therapist, especially one like Steve and I that do NLP, then there's a thing called Timeline, which is exceptionally effective and can really, really transform the way you look at the past. And it's very much like Steve just said about this whole idea of letting go, of honouring those objections, of learning lessons from the past. I think of it just to give something for somebody to listen to a podcast who's like, right, okay, how do I start to shift on from this? And it's kind of a timeline-like technique. It goes on a lot of what you've just been saying, which is let the past be the past. When we hold on to all those resentments and objections, it's very easy. Like if you imagine that your life is happening in time. So the way I like to think about it, this is absolutely going to age us. Like it's those old slide boxes that you used to get in school where you used to put the old slides in.
I have no idea where I'm too young to know. I don't know.
You were PowerPoint right from the very beginning, you know.
No, I was Blackboards. Blackboard definitely.
Yeah, blackboards and slides. Yeah. And if you think about it, what's happening is that every day your mind is moving memories just back a little bit in time and it's recoding them in your head. But when we hold on to resentment or anger, what can happen is that even though the memory was 10 years ago, it stays like right here. It stays like now. And we keep it in the now by keeping feeding it energy and time. And actually just going through a nice simple, can be a closed eye process, a meditative process. You could actually even like write a letter to the memory, anything like that. But something that unhooks it from now and lets it just drift back into wherever it belongs. So if that thing was 20 years ago, you could imagine what it would be like if that just went 20 years ago into the past and you didn't keep feeding it the energy that keeps it alive, that you just let it. It's finished. As Steve keeps saying, it's over. It's done. Now, if it's not over, that's a different thing. If you're right in the middle of your breakup or you're being bullied right now or something else like that is happening, that can be a little bit more difficult because you're currently in it. You might need to get out of it first, but still, That's one of the ones I use that with clients quite often, is this idea of let it go into the past. Let it go. But to do that, you have to give it the green light for forgiveness. You have to honour your objections to letting it go, the fact that you're still going to be safe even though you let it go, because it's that then allows you to go, I don't need this anymore. And then it can whiz off into the past.
It's really interesting. I really like that. And I think as well, because forgiveness is a natural process as well, isn't it? It's like, it is something, it should do that naturally. It should go off into the past.
This is the design flaw I'm talking about, you know?
Sometimes it just kind of gets stuck a little bit. I love, so you mentioned NLP there. Obviously, some of the viewers and the listeners might not know what NLP is, but it is something we specialise in, isn't it? It's a set of tools and techniques for creating change. And one of the other things I really love about NLP is a thing called perceptual positions. Now, we're not going to teach that in a podcast or anything like that, but it's basically a way of seeing a situation from somebody else's perspective. And for me, this is an amazing thing to do that can help you forgive and really let go of that hurt and resentment. So I went through this with my ex-girlfriend that cleared the bank accounts that we mentioned there. That lovely, fun experience.
Absolutely.
And it was just incredible. You know, the difference was unbelievable. So basically it involves seeing it from the other person's perspective, doesn't it? So you step into their shoes inside your imagination. And what you also do is you see the whole situation from like a neutral observer's perspective. So you look on as if you're like a mediator, as if you're someone who is completely impartial, someone who doesn't have any, skin in the game, so to speak.
I quite often used to use the thing of we're aliens observing these human beings doing something, whatever it is. I always like that one.
I can imagine you do a good impression of an alien.
Absolutely. We'll save that for a future episode.
Yeah, exactly. Very interesting. The mind boggles. So, but yeah, it's really good. And you get that objectivity from that space, but you also get to step into the shoes of the person that you're looking to forgive. And I think that can often be the really powerful part. Because often when we hold on to all of that resentment, it's because we're seeing it from our own perspective. We're locked into seeing it through our own eyes. We're connected with our own beliefs, our own opinions, our own experiences, our own stuff as well as getting mixed in there too, our own baggage. So when we do actually step out of our own way and see it from the other person's perspective and an observer's place, then all of a sudden we get some really cool insights into it. So I find that can be really good. And I think for me, when you actually, it's like that Billy Connolly joke. I don't know if you've heard that Billy Connolly joke.
I probably have, but go for it anyway.
Never trust a man unless you've walked a mile in his shoes. And then if you still don't like him, that's fine because you're a mile away and you've got his shoes. Clearly
that was told almost to Billy Connolly quality.
Is that
Steve.
it? Yeah,
Clearly
I've got a career in stand-up comedy awaits. If this podcast plummets, then at least I've got another
got a backup.
So there you go. But yeah, so I think it's a really good thing to do, to see it from the other person's perspective. And I think that you've made progress when you reach the stage where you don't really care about the person anymore. Yep. I don't mean in a nasty way, but just more in a sense that they don't occupy your thoughts. They don't have power over you anymore inside your own minds. Again, to go back to some influencers, a lot of them, I don't know if you've seen, there's a trend on TikTok at the moment where people who break up with their ex and they make a TikTok video where they slag off their ex, they go absolutely mental. He was this or she was that and stuff like that. A few choice words in there as well. And then at the end they go, but it's okay because I forgive you. And I'm thinking, you've not forgiven that person at all.
I was thinking that, just before you said that, I was thinking, we have to talk about this exact thing.
It's so frustrating. They're like, I forgive them. I feel at peace now. You're like, well, you've just ranted and raved for like the last. It's clear you have quite a bit of work to do. Yeah. Now, if you can talk about the situation in a more kind of neutral way, then I'll start to believe that you've made some progress. But no, I still think there's a wee bit of work. So I think when you get to that stage where, I mean, I'm not going to say it's going to go away completely, but when you get to that stage where it's more apathetic, then I think that's when you can really finally move on, because that person no longer has power over you.
Yeah, I think I just have to go back to it because I think it's such a key insight. is that thing that if you're still going, I mean, I've totally forgiven them, but I mean, it's like, I mean, it still upsets me a bit. Then you've not truly let it go, you know, and it is. I know that you might sit here and think that Steve and I are just making this up and it's all very good for you guys. Genuinely, it's possible for anybody to let this stuff go if, to use Steve's phrase, you give it the green light and you make the choice to say, I am going to forgive. I'm going to move on, because going back to the start, it's not about them, it's about you. And I think it's just such a good point. But it's probably one of the most freeing things. And you say that, you know, you were apathetic to that, and I'm going to add an extra layer in. When I look back now, and not only does a big thing that I had to let go in my kind of progress was kind of always feeling a little bit like the outsider. I moved school a couple of times. There was, as I said a couple of times in this podcast, there was some bullying that went on. I have now worked with clients who have had significantly worse bullying than I ever had, but still, it's a personal thing and it affects you and it gets you in various ways. There's a really interesting place I've got to now, you know, and obviously it's now many, many years ago, but an ability to actually to be grateful for what happened because of the fact that it led me to here. I wouldn't do this job if I hadn't had those experiences. The number of young people that I've been able to help or talk to, or when I go into schools and I do big assemblies and all these things, and to be able to talk about my own experiences and to relate to what's going on. It actually, some kid asked me recently, I think he was about 14, and he said, well, if you could go back and live your life, you surely would live your life now and not be bullied? Mm-hmm. And actually I sat there for a wee second and I went, I think you're going to be really surprised by this answer, but I don't know if I would. I was like, it was horrible when it was happening at the time, but what's happened now because of it and everything that's came off, a career that I've done for, you know, nearly 20 years, and all the people that I've got to meet and help and work with and all of these things, perhaps for what I went through, I'd probably live through it again if I knew that this was going to happen at the end. And that for me is forgiveness. I also look back as well now. I couldn't do it at the time at all, but now with everything I know, I can also look back and realise that some of the kind of maybe two especially of the people who really bullied me, just perhaps where they were in their lives at that point, and actually feel a little bit of empathy for them, you know, and it wasn't right. What they did wasn't right. They shouldn't have done it. But actually being able to look back and go, must have been tough to be that wee guy, you know, back then.
I love that. I think it's amazing. I think it's almost like that's the kind of the final step on the journey to forgiveness, where not only do you feel apathetic, but you actually go a step beyond and appreciate that the gifts that actually brought you, and that sent you off in a particular direction, and you might not have been doing what you do just now.
But that's it.
This podcast might not have even existed
exactly.
if you weren't bullied as a kid.
For being lanky and ginger.
Yeah.
I will just add in there, you know, because again, you know this, but there's a thing we do at the end of one of our courses where actually a part of it, only a small part of it, but as a part of it about gratitude. And one of the things I always say to everybody when they're in the middle of that bit, as I say, maybe you need to say thank you to teachers who didn't teach you the way that you wanted to be taught. But actually now you look back, you can go, actually thank you for teaching me who I didn't want to be, or thank you for making me a better mum or dad, perhaps by being a really shitty mum or dad back then. And you having that horrible experience, but your kids are now benefiting from it, or your friends now benefit from it, or other people benefit from what you learned because of the crap stuff that you went through.
I love it because it's like a complete flip, isn't it? A lot of people think that when they're bullied, or if they have a bad experience, or you know, if they do hold on to resentment towards someone, that they can never even imagine that actually the opposite could be true. Maybe this is actually one of the most transformational experiences of your life. And I know, like, if I relate to that to my own example of my ex-girlfriends, that was absolutely true. You know, from that point onwards, you know, I was heading down a very kind of safe, you know, 2.4 children kind of life, which is fine, by the way. If that's what people want, that's cool. But I mean, I lived in quite a small town, and people tend to keep themselves to themselves in that town. They do travel, but it's a little bit insular, if I'm being honest. And but because of that breakup, you know, I ended up, I started doing all sorts of things. I started, doing Latin dancing, which I don't think we've talked about in any of the episodes so far. I met so many different people. I started focusing on my business. And again, it was a very similar thing. I don't think all of the great things that have happened over the last 15 years would have happened if I hadn't have experienced that mildly traumatic moment back then.
You'd be driving a Mondeo, living in a wee village.
Well, I mean, I do have a Ford Fiesta, so I mean, I can't really. A Mondeo would be a step up for me.
Okay.
So, but it's true. I mean, it's like the plot of every superhero movie, isn't it? You might need to help me out here because superheroes aren't really my thing, but. Every superhero movie, the origin story is pretty much the same, isn't it? There's some sort of traumatic experience that the protagonist goes through, but it's from that traumatic experience that they then create some sort of special gift, and their life heads in a completely new, exciting, and very powerful direction. So Spider-Man was bitten by a radioactive spider.
But that wasn't
right?
the thing that made him. The thing that made him. That made him Spider-Man. But the thing that made him Spider-Man was the fact that his Uncle Ben got killed.
Oh, of course.
Then Uncle Ben says, with great power comes great responsibility, and all of that type of stuff.
The radioactive spider gave him his powers, but the psychological part was
had to go through a trauma. Superman obviously was sent away, and then his parents and bizarre pseudo step parents died. There's a lot of parents dying to make a superhero movie. Batman, mum and dad got killed, loads and tons of money.
It's the go-to trauma, isn't it?
Iron Man. Tons of cash, got kidnapped, and I don't know how that quite happened. But anyway, we'll just go on the fact that he had trauma too.
But it's true, and it's like whether it be physical trauma or psychological trauma or whatever. And we often jump to the conclusion, I guess, the whole kind of recency bias, isn't it? Where we think that this is a horrendous time in my life, but you never know. There's a very good chance if you allow it to be. This could be the first step towards a new and exciting direction in your life. So I think that's a really crucial step in the forgiveness process.
And a lovely way, I think, to end this episode.
I
message.
think we have hopefully we've done forgiveness justice. It's a massive topic.
Half an hour, we've just covered it.
Exactly. We've solved the whole problem of forgiveness for everyone on the planet. We're pretty much good to go.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
It's honestly one of the most important things. If you're watching this, we're not asking you to be a superhero. It starts with choice. Give it some time. Honour those objections. Pay attention to them and what they are. But I'm going to echo what Steve said. Give yourself a green light. It's about choice. It's about you. It's not about them.
So thank you so much. Hope you enjoyed this episode. If you are watching on YouTube, if you could like and subscribe and pop a comment below and let us know what you think.
If you're listening to us on audio, then please follow us. And also, if you can, please give us a 5-star review and tell us how much you've enjoyed it, because it really helps us reach more people.